Yeah. Was this a morning drive or?
This was a morning drive.
Like at the box, yeah?
It's still one of the.
Yeah, no.
I'm trying to think of sometimes. Yeah.
I got it.
Yeah. You should send me this. Why am I getting? Oh, what's happening?
Oh, yeah. We're gonna be there. There, watching her.
We get a lot of reminders. Sorry for the issue.
Yeah, no, that's what's from all that. Sure.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Just wait. Really? That was a story. Fascinating. Oh, you're even early, hey? Medical school.
Everything else is good. Now see the train was
I was in Boston for, I see.
yeah, good deal. Yeah, he's with Boston. Yeah, kind of.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So our EA taught them about this communication. Sometimes
there's
okay.
No, I think I'm fine.
Last time she tell me that where she went to what she's doing.
So before this, we were in my similar reason like that.
Good.
Thanks for the help. Oh, Firearms. Yeah. So somebody would say,
How are you?
sure.
Very good.
Nothing for you. But this year you can't go. So they had
Let me know what you need.
I think it's the first time ever. So maybe if it could be,
Oh. You are.
I'm sorry.
I don't know who that is. Yeah, they're awesome. That's the other one. Maybe. Yeah. Come on. There's some. But yeah, we're just my both as a professor. It's just these mistakes he makes.
Okay.
You get 100 because it's just a rubber stamp.
Can somebody text you about this?
He's our professor now. And Whatever you want to break through.
Our meeting was projected her down, that's what it says it was.
And that was what it is, you have to, okay, like, actually, if you're training, maybe there's specific things that we do here.
Yeah.
Use that to add on, which is fine. But it really says a new person is in their background packet phase.
All right, let's call this meeting to order at 9 a.m. on 10/25/24. First agenda item is a roll call for members. Dr. Patrick Bazzini is not attending. Dr. Coble,
Here.
Mr. Daniel,
Here.
Dr. Downing,
Here.
Dr. Drake,
Here.
Dr. Kerrigan,
Here.
Mr. Parsons, not attending, Ms. Zemek.
Here.
All right, due to Commissioner Parsons preparing for trial, he's unable to attend. Is there a motion to excuse Commissioner Parsons?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Also, is there a motion to excuse Dr. Bazzini, who is on international travel?
So moved. I'm sorry.
There is a motion and a second.
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 All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next agenda item. Everybody's had, I assume, an opportunity to review and adopt the minutes. Review the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is the office administrative update.
Thank you, Dr. Bernard. Whoa, sorry.
Whoa.
I'm so used to having to get really close to these. The main things that are in your board meeting materials for this agenda item are the budget. We closed out essentially having expended all of our funds, save for a few $1,000s. We have the budget in there for you that we worked with OCA on, ready to be approved for this next cycle. We have posted a position for a new administrative assistant, commission coordinator, EA office manager type person. So that is currently posted, and we'll see what kind of resumes we get for that. So the budget accounts for that position. Those are the main things on the budget. We would need a motion to approve the budget. I'm happy to answer any questions about the budget if anyone has any.
Any questions?
No.
All right, is there a motion to approve the 2025 budget?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I'm impressed that the budget was as close and handled as close as it was. Normally you have line items that you have to try and see if you can get permission to move around, so that was really well done.
We definitely lean heavily on OCA for help with that. And in fact, the last few months of the fiscal year, Lee and I were every few days looking at the budget to make sure we were okay. Because in the off years, when we don't have these big influxes of licensing renewals, the budget is much tighter. And so we have to really plan for that. It's a lot of planning involved. So with respect to the other thing we wanted to update you on, we have been working diligently to get materials uploaded to the database. All 6 buttons, so to speak, are live. We pushed up to sort of this queue of documents, everything that staff felt was appropriate to be able to put out into the public domain from the materials we get from labs. Now, bear in mind that a lot of what we get, we cannot put out in the public domain, such as DNA records, other things that it's not within our authority to push those out. So what we're trying to do is put out there quality documents, the sorts of things that DPS and HFSC have been doing for a while, we've been working with the labs to make sure that they take a look and that there's not something sensitive in there that we inadvertently missed, but we have all the disclosures up at this point. I went to TCDLA this last week and showed them some of that. And I think they were happy to see that it was there. I know Mr. Daniel also presented to them. The quality incidents, HFSC has all their stuff up. The rest of the labs will need to work on that over time, and they are doing that. So I think DPS has a lot of stuff that they want to move over, and it's just a matter of getting the resources dedicated to that. I don't know if you wanted to add anything, Lee, or if any commissioners have any questions. The next thing we're doing is the complaints. So historically, we have just put up the disposition letters for those. The challenge with the complaints for us is that we might get a complaint from an inmate, and it may have all kinds of victim information in there. For example, we get a lot of child sexual assault related complaints. So we have to be extremely careful about redacting that information, in part because, let's just say it's a regular sexual assault of an adult accused sexual assault, alleged sexual assault. That person who is the survivor in that case may, within the court system, be referenced as a Jane Doe with a pseudonym because they've applied to get that type of protection, but we wouldn't know that. And it's not necessarily the case that the defendant, they're not going to refer to that person as Jane Doe. They're going to refer to them in their complaint to us as how they know them in life. And so we are trying to be very meticulous in going through, adding what we can, but also being mindful that some of that information needs a very close look. So those complaints are next, and we may be reaching out to the labs as needed for help sorting through that material. So we're trying very hard, though, to get as much as we can up there. I did have an inquiry come in from Cardozo Law, the Perlmutter Center there. They want to try to roll this out to the rest of the country and are trying to figure out how much it costs to build the database, which is tricky for us because we built it internally with OCA and they don't really have a sense of how much it costs because these are full-time employees that they just dedicated to us to work on it. But certainly if there are funds out there available, there are other states very interested in doing something similar. So we'll see how that rolls out. And that's all I had on that. Lee, did you have anything else?
All right, the next item agenda are the complaints and disclosures. Mr. Daniel?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Bernard. I'd like to begin by just, again, telling the public and telling the rest of the members of this commission what a tremendous job our staff does and how thorough they are in all the factual analysis, and they make our job so easy. But our first item today is number 2416. It comes from DPS Austin in the talk section. The analyst had determined several instances where alprazolam was eluting prior to the alprazolam D5 internal standard. The retention times are a little bit different between the two substances. The laboratory set out to determine if any of the results they saw were reporting alprazolam. They did amendment from some inconclusive conclusion. As a root cause review, the lab determined that the 4-chloro-deschloroalprazolam elutes at a similar retention time for the same transitions as alprazolam. The results of the evaluation triggered in the tox section and caused them to perform a complete retention time evaluation of both substances. The lab also evaluated the impact of the seized drugs. It was not extensive because the designer compound, alprazolam, deschloroalprazolam, did not come on the market until about 2021. So the lab notified all users. Staff had brought forth a recommendation to take no further action. If there are not any questions or concerns, I will make that the form of a motion.
Can we just pause for one moment? Dr. Kerrigan had some follow-up questions on this item that she put into the lab, and they came back and answered those questions within the last couple of days, and I defer to Dr. Kerrigan, but I think they provided satisfactory answers to your questions.
Yes.
So I would make that the form of motion. We take no further action in light of the root cause analysis and the corrective action.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Which brings us to our second item, which is item 2426. It comes from the Serological Research Institute, Forensic Biology section. A defense expert had reviewed some metadata as part of a discovery and revealed certain global filer re-injections were programmed in the lab's 3500 instrument were not being performed at the correct kilovolt injection. The lab was doing re-injections at 3 kilovolts rather than the 1.2. As the process, the 35 instrument employs an electric charge during the process of capillary electrophoresis. The charge is measured in kilovolts and it moves the amplified DNA through the capillary where the instrument detects and analyzes the genetic material. The data is then analyzed and ultimately displayed in the form of electrophoregram. The problem was the analyst was scheduling injection and re-injection times for 7, 15, or 30 seconds, and they were meant to be re-injected at 1.2. The error occurred at 7 and 30, not at 15. The lab, through its review, had attributed the issue to human error. They found there were no defects in the actual instrument itself or in the global filer kit. The higher injection voltage increased DNA peak heights, and it can create background noise, creating potential for identifying the noise as true DNA peaks. They had looked at about 580 cases from back in 2017 up through early 2022. Most of the cases, or half of the cases, not requiring reanalysis because the re-injection data was not used by the analyst in that case. The lab did reinterpret all affected cases using the original injections, performed this time at 1.2. The lab prioritized the most recent cases. The lab provided a list of 9 affected Texas cases and the disposition resolution of each. All of those were issued amended reports. The clients were appropriately notified. In light of the root cause review and the corrective action and also the notification of all the clients, staff had brought forth a recommendation. We take no further action. And
I'm sorry to
Yes,
interrupt, Mr. Daniel. Ms. Zemak and Dr. Coble had a couple of follow-up questions, and to my knowledge, we have not received answers. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So I actually would revise that recommendation to table because I haven't seen those come in.
until that gets resolved. Yeah. In light of that, I would respectfully make a motion, we table this item.
Second. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, this is tabled.
And that brings us to our third item, which is 24.27 from DPS Tyler TOC section. They had an incident with their refrigerator down there, a mechanical failure. They had 299 blood kits being held at 19 to 28 degrees Celsius. It happened back in June for about 3 days. Their policy maintains that the refrigerator be maintained at a lower temperature. Of the 299, 114 were analyzed and were waiting to return to the customers. 185 were pending TOCs analysis, and 105 of those were potentially pending TOCs analysis also. They notified each of the users or customers of the lab. The emails, as they saw it, they had sent out a system where emails were sent to the lab manager, quality manager, section supervisor, and through some vacation time that they were not notified of the problem. they've since corrected that. Frankly, the actual impact on tox and drugs, they really couldn't determine. They've since had their settings, the text messages are now sent to each of their personal cell phones, weekends, vacation, or otherwise. And there's a notification monitoring system now we delegated when the laboratory manager's out of the office and not monitoring emails or texts. So it sounds like they're doing everything they can to correct a isolated problem. And staff have brought forth a recommendation in light of the root cause review and analysis, and also the corrective action that we take no further action. And if there are not any questions or concerns, I'm prepared to make that in the form of a motion that we take no further action.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And that brings us to the fourth item that comes out of DPS Weslaco, seized drugs. They had reported an issue to the commission back in early August in their seized drug section where an analyst appears to have deliberately altered a random number generator, which was on a form required to be documented in the case file. Can't tell why, but it's either to avoid a quality incident or avoid some additional work. The first 5 numbers in the RNG form determine which items must be sampled. The reviewer who found the problem advised analysts they needed to generate a new RNG form for item 5-01 and need to analyze whether another set of 5 units from an exhibit 05.01, since the unit selected will be different. There was a discussion with the analyst, didn't produce RNG form 0501 showing the correct number of exhibit units. The technical review brought the case file to the seized drug technical point of contact and the section supervisor's attention. The analyst, like they said, was either avoiding additional work or avoiding a quality incident. They've now amended the policy in the seized drug manual. The seized drug manual policy always provided that any time RNG is used in casework, the results are supposed to be retained in the case record. That obviously is not being done. The lab manager disclosed the incident to all impacted customers. The lab removed the analyst from casework and then resealed and transferred all the open cases back to the evidence section. The analyst subsequently has resigned, and other cases that were in their possession were reassigned and reanalyzed. And then they're reviewing 71 cases that the analyst did 90 days prior to the incident. They're not specific about what they're going to do to prevent this, but they're exploring opportunities to improve. In light of that, the staff has a provision, 651 Administrative Code, that they can investigate this further. Staff would recommend we accept this for self-disclosure and possibly just allow the staff to investigate it, since most of us have day jobs. We don't have a day job anymore, do we?
I do still.
For another week or so? Oh, okay. So I was gonna make that form motion that we accept the disclosure and allow staff investigation.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And that brings us to our fifth item. It comes out of the Brazoria County Crime Lab, seized drug section. Interestingly, the lab had failed to re-verify a formaldehyde chemical and used it beyond its re-verification date. The lab director went to re-verify the formaldehyde and found 2 of the solutions that were not associated with it were also out of date. The laboratory is currently not performing any blood drug analysis, but they use a solvent for cleaning. And the lab has addressed similar issues with expired chemicals and other chemicals past their expiration date. Frankly, the problem stems from a caseload issue. The lab believes if the caseload is not decreased, that this will likely continue, or issues such as this will continue. They've sought to assign a designated analyst to go through the inventory of the spreadsheet of chemicals once a month, make sure everything is current, re-verify expired or past test date chemicals, order new stock solutions, dispose of expired materials, and they're gonna have monthly meetings to discuss things that are about to expire, which I guess is encouraging. Staff had brought forth a recommendation in light of all the work they've done as far as the analysis and corrective action, that we take no further action. I appreciate the fact that staff also made a recommendation that we need to emphasize to the Brazoria County officials that if you're gonna have a lab, you need to fund it and staff it adequately. And I guess I'm gonna make that in the form of a motion. We take no further action, but include a note back to the lab to communicate to the Brazoria County Commissioners Court that there are funding issues, obviously personnel issues, and they need to support the requirements for quality work, or something to that effect. There's probably a better way to say that, but it clearly appears to be the problem.
It is a long-standing issue for Brazil.
So can we put that into the motion? Okay. So motion's been.
And I'll let Lynn and Lee massage that to say that correctly, as far as how we communicate the response. But if we no further action, with a note to the lab and county officials that they fund and staff their lab adequately.
All right, motion's been made. Is there a second? Second's been made. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Our sixth item is 24.32, comes to DNA Reference Laboratory Forensic Biology Unit. We had an item come in where the reference laboratory reported some ambiguous misconduct allegations unrelated to forensic analysis against another analyst who recently resigned. The analyst responded very adequately to each allegation, but described several issues that raised additional concerns for staff and the laboratory's quality system. I don't think we need to spend a whole lot of time on this. Staff have made a recommendation that we simply table this, pending further communication, probably look at it in January. Is that correct, Lynn?
Yes.
Okay. And with that being said, I'll make that in the form of motion. We table this to allow staff to communicate with the accrediting body. All right, motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Our next one comes from DNA Labs International Forensic Biology Unit, item 24.34. It's a little complicated. They had reported an incident in the forensic biology DNA section that they found typos in stutter files in kit settings for Star Mix, Global Filer, and also Fusion 6C that were used in validation subsequent casework. They also found that two person runs were inadvertently omitted from both validations. The lab believes the cause for this issue is a lack of checks and balances during the validation process at the time where only one person performs entry of the settings during those validations. In a recent validation, the lab identified that the slope and intercept values in the Global Filer 2 base pair back stutter file for Star Mix did not even align with those published in the lab's internal validation of software. As a corrective action, the lab has performed an audit of all Star Mix V2.6 kit settings and stutter files. They've compared the validation of current settings and stutter files for Global Filer, Fusion 6C, Fusion 5C, 24plex. A review checked also for clerical errors in addition to errors that could affect Star Mix runs performed in casework. At the conclusion of all the review, the managers discussed that only clerical errors were observed and will be detailed in what they call an internal validation final review form, which I take as a new form within the lab. The beauty of all this is they determined the impact on casework to be somewhat negligible. They're now requiring all settings that affect analysis and interpretation to be checked by not one, but two qualified senior DNA analysts. And their work has been somewhat extensive, and in light of the root cause analysis and their corrective actions, staff had brought forth a recommendation. We take no further action, which I concur with, and if there aren't any questions or concerns, I will make that in the form of a motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Our next item, which I think Dr. Bernard is going to
Yeah, I'll
recuse
recuse
himself on,
myself on this.
and Dr. Drake would take over this item, preside over this item. It comes out of the Southwest Institute of Forensic Sciences, their tox section. They report an incident where drug chemists expressed concerns regarding certain administrative practices and technical issues in the forensic chemistry section. The lab asked analysts to provide a written response to their concerns to facilitate an evaluation. The concerns went way back to, 2019, as she documented all that. The lab issued a corrected report for cases where a quantitative result for chlordiazepoxide was reported and changed the reporting qualitative or detected value for cases between April 20 and on into October 2021. The tox section's current development program improvement involving an instrument maintenance policy, and that's actually contained in our meeting materials. In light of the tox section's corrective action and their root cause analysis, the staff had brought forth a recommendation that there's no need to take further action, which I will concur with, and if there aren't any questions or issues or concerns, I'll make that in the form of a motion.
I would recuse on this one since I spoke with the quality director about some of the issues that pertain to this complaint a couple of months ago. Thank you.
We're running out of bodies to have a quorum on this one. It's gonna be close.
All right. So we have a motion for no further action. Do I have a second? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries.
Which brings us to our ninth item. It's item 24.38. It comes from the Center for Human Identification. And Dr. Cole advised me just last few months they changed from the UNT, Health Science Center, Center for Human Identification, to be the Center for Human Identification. Am I correct about that?
That's right.
And because of that, you're going to recuse yourself from this, aren't you?
Yes, I will. I will accuse myself in this one.
And anybody else going to recuse themselves on this?
I do as well.
Okay, so I think we'll have enough bodies. Back in April, the Center for Human Identification reported an incident in its forensic biology section. The lab had discovered a delay in reporting an SDS association to an agency. Way back almost 2 years ago, in January 2023, the lab identified a potential association between an unidentified remains profile and a state level offender profile. And the center requested a confirmation of offender sample in Texas DPS's stack system that same month. The center uses an Excel spreadsheet to manage this process, but in this case, for some reason, it was not added to the spreadsheet, and that resulted in almost 1 year delay in reporting the association to the agency. It looks like a pretty simple matter that will be corrected through clerical application, and staff had brought forth a recommendation that there's, in light of the root cause review and analysis and the corrective action, there may be no reason to take any further action. I'm prepared to make that in form of motion unless there are any questions.
Hearing none, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Which brings us to our 10th item. It comes out of Dallas PD Crime Lab, their latent print section. Back in June, they reported an incident in that section where there was an erroneous exclusion in a capital murder matter that had been worked about 7 years earlier, back in 2017, by the forensic latent print analyst and also a verifier, and both the examiners are no longer with the lab. The good news is the lab has reworked the case and reported it out correctly. As far as analysis and cause, lab believes Russell examiner did not compare the latent print correctly. The analyst researched the latent print number 2A, which was envelope 3 admitted by Mr. Dollins through APHIS first with no hit. The lab is not sure how the examiner looked at the candidate list from the APHIS search and the candidate did not appear in the list, or whether she incorrectly analyzed the pattern type. The lab believes there was an urgency at that time to reduce a backlog, and that may have been a contributing factor to the error. The current analysts in the lab have reworked the case and found not one but 2 more latent prints that were identified associated with that subject. There are 5 latent print examiners that have now reviewed the original analyst cases for that 6-month window of time. The lab has updated its comparison worksheet to include now a pattern type requirement. The lab also provides yearly documented training on human factors and cognitive bias issues. The lab also reworked the case at issue for the Dallas PD homicide unit and notified them a few months back, and they've looked at 16 other cases that the analyst analyzed and found no other erroneous exclusions or associations. So it appears to me it was very thorough as far as their review and analysis, and their corrective action has been extensive. So in light of that, staff have brought forth a recommendation that there's no need to take any further action. And I'm prepared to make that form of a motion unless there are any questions or comments.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second's made. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And then our 11th item comes from NMS Labs seized drug section. Just last month in September, they reported an incident where the lab identified some discrepancies between the chemist's results on a cannabinoid quantitation of gummy samples. And the COMSI test had led the laboratory to reevaluate its cannabinoid quantitation method to determine what contributed or caused this error. The lab had provided THC gummy samples as part of a cannabinoid quantitation and competency test to analysts and chemists from January through February 24. They were previously analyzed by competent analysts, and previously reported results were used as target values. Chemists, however, achieved some results that were completely unexpected. The lab's method of cannabinoid quantitation, the samples were included in a 5 milliliter of methanol immediately prior to being aliquoted for extraction. One chemist saw where they were performing analysis due to a control failure in the original run and used a longer soak time of up to 2 hours prior to aliquoting. The results of the 2 different analyses were compared. The laboratory concluded the length of soak time had a significant impact on the concentration detected. They have now conducted a new validation of the method and updated its policy to require a 2-hour soak time, which brings consistency, obviously, for the methanol dilution step for the gummy samples. Based on previous sample preparation and process method, cannabinoid concentration of gummy samples may very well have been underreported, and the lab went back to pull 6 months of data and evaluate all the edible samples. The lab pulled a total of 14 test exhibits, had 12 of them from DPS, and they communicated to the client about the updated process and offered resubmission. And we have a copy of that in our meeting materials. I'm not sure what more they could have done to correct it in light of their root cause analysis and all their corrective action case review, which was extensive. Staff had brought forth a recommendation that there's not any need to take any further action, which I concur with, and I'll make that in the form of a motion unless there's any questions or comments.
I did have one comment, which is one of the things that we noticed about NMS presenting this material to us is they had listed the number of cases impacted as 0, but what really should be listed is that we don't know how many cases are impacted the number of cases impacted are unknown, the clients may choose not to resubmit the edibles for retesting, but it doesn't necessarily mean that those cases weren't impacted. Edibles, as we all know, having gone through the process of trying to validate methods to analyze and distinguish between hemp and THC. And we're still in the throes of that in terms of what legislative adjustments may be made next session, and perhaps Dr. Stout will speak to that a little bit when he gets up. But the point is that these cases are hard to work. And so NMS is doing it for labs that I think have not validated methods for edibles. Is that right? DPS, you guys are outsourcing those, or do you have a method?
We have a method for liquids and oils and the plant material itself, but we do outsource edibles to an outsourced vendor, which is NMS.
Right, and so I'm not sure how many labs are even going to attempt to validate a method for edibles, because it's such a mess. I don't know if you recall a few years back when we had seized drug TLs from a few labs presenting to the commission on how difficult this is. In particular, when you have food substances and all of the things that go into that, the chemistry is difficult and messy, and the instruments get messed up, and it's quite challenging. So it is good that NMS offers this for the agencies that need help with it, and also we just want to make sure that people understand that unless they resubmit, we actually don't know how many cases were impacted. So I don't know if you have anything else on it, Dr. Kerrigan, but I did want to point that out.
Yeah, I think that's it. Essentially, as we understand it from the materials that were provided so far, although NMS offered to retest the specimens that might have been affected because of the bias in the method, none actually were retested. So if that's incorrect, then perhaps someone from NMS can speak to that issue.
Dr. Spargo, would you mind going to the mic? I'm sorry, because otherwise the recording won't pick it up.
Sure. First, can I address the point about it's unknown versus providing zero? Currently, that's a limitation in our in Qualtrics idea gen with our dropdown. That it is a number or it is other. Perhaps we should have chosen other, but we can certainly look into that in the future. It's not our intention to hide anything. It's just how we have approached it within the system. And then we have sent out the client letters just recently, so I'm hoping that people will choose to submit. We just haven't received anything back yet.
All right, motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second,
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And that brings us to our 12th item. It comes from Sorensen Forensics, Forensic Biology and DNA section. They had reported an instance in there where the lab performed a deviation from its regular extraction method for a bullet casing without a validation being performed. The analyst initiated a deviation for the bullet casing extraction method in order to process one particular case. The lab added the procedure to its analytical procedures manual and used it on 2 additional cases without a validation of the method. They performed a review of all current methods. They sought to notify all the clients. No clients responded to the lab's offer for any retesting. They believe the failure to validate was due to a lack of clarity in the direction given to the lab's procedures as to when a validation is necessary. They've since held a training for all lab personnel to review all changes in their validation policy. The chief scientific officer who is involved in the error of omitting the validation is no longer with Sorensen Forensics. I'm not sure what more they could have done. In light of that, staff had brought forth a recommendation of no further action based on the root cause analysis and corrective action. And if there are not any questions or comments, I'll make that in the form of a motion that we take no further action.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Our next item is item 13. It comes from Austin Forensic Science Department, seized drug section, item 24.42. The Austin Forensic Science Department reported an incident in the seized drug section where the lab found 2 out of 4 items in the case were reported under an incorrect LIMS time number. The results for items 4 and 5 should have been reported as items 5 and 6 respectively. The lab discovered the error during an audit, and when it randomly selected 5 previously tested cases for reanalysis, they immediately notified the Travis County DA's office. The lab believes the error may have occurred when the analyst selected items for testing based on the highest penalty group for each of the suspected substances, rather than how they were listed in the customer's request for testing. And the LIMS number and the last digit of the VersaDex tag number may have also been misread by the analyst. Evidence items are always expected prior analysis, but there's no policy requiring verification after analysis or during the report writing process of the numbers. The lab has removed the evidence from the affected case from the destruction list for further inspection. The lab conducted a review of analytical data in the case. The lab amended all affected records. The lab also reanalyzed all the items, including plant materials that were not previously tested. As part of the corrective action for similar nonconformity, the lab implemented a policy that requires visual verification of evidence and labels prior to signing off on a report. And it sounded like a very thorough remediation, but staff had brought forth a recommendation we take no further action in light of the root cause analysis, the corrective action, and the extensive case review by the lab. And if there are not any questions or concerns, I will make that in the form of a motion that we take no further action.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And that would bring us to our items involving description analysis of missing evidence and self-disclosure out of the Jefferson County Regional Crime Lab. Item 2428, they had reported an incident in the seized drug section where the lab realized drug standard 1P-LSD was missing. Lab personnel immediately notified other seized drug analysts and the lab director. Once all standards locations were checked and it simply could not be located, lab personnel had last used the 1P-LSD standard back in September of 22. There were no cases that were actually affected as the standard was only used in instrument validation. Lab personnel had transferred the 1P-LSD standard from the original vendor container to a gas chromatograph vial with a handwritten label for convenient reference. Also, only a very small amount of substance remained in the vial. The lab believes analysts accidentally placed the 1P-LSD standard with other validation materials, and they were eventually erroneously discarded. The lab now, by way of corrective action, labels liquid certified reference samples transferred to the lab gas chromatograph vials with a printed label to distinguish them from casework and also validation materials. They also made changes in their SOP to reflect that process. All materials are now currently stored in refrigerators and freezers and have been labeled with printed labels. It sounds like a heck of a labeling issue that they've done everything they could possibly do to correct it. And in light of that, staff had brought forth a recommendation that there's no need to take any further action, which I concur with. Given the root cause review and the corrective action, I'll make that in the form of a motion unless there are any comments or concerns.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And that would bring us to our complaints. And I think this is an item that Dr. Coble and the CMAC may recuse themselves on. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And this is a little bit of a rerun. It's a second complaint filed by Raymond Lumsden. He's alleging a DNA analyst for the Center for Human Identification had provided some misleading testimony about secondary transfer of genetic material. The case involved a digital penetration incident. The complaint initially alleged that the analyst had testified to the jury that the transfer of DNA would have to be a biological fluid. And frankly, that's not borne out of the record at all. The allegation is really not consistent with the record, at least that part of it. As a second point, the complaint alleges the analyst testified that the partial YSTR sample belonged to Raymond Lumsden, and that allegation, frankly, is also not supported in the record, the trial record. Thirdly, the complaint alleges the analyst testified that there were, quote, no studies to support that secondary transfer is possible from touch DNA or even from a towel or doorknob, and that also appears to be a mischaracterization of testimony. At the pretrial hearing, she had testified that she couldn't say how likely it would be for a person who used a towel to transfer that genetic material to a second person using the same towel. And then finally, the complaint alleges the analyst had testified to the fact that washing hands and then shaking another person's hands would not transfer DNA, and that it is, quote, unlikely. That was a question that had been posed on redirected trial, where the analyst had stated that the secondary transfer is more probable if someone may have licked their hands before shaking hands rather than just washing their hands off. Staff had reviewed this carefully. They had made an allegation that since many of the allegations, and they had made a position that since many of the allegations are unfounded, that rather than reopen the complaint for further review, that we go ahead and dismiss it in light of the many things that were not borne out in the actual trial record. And I will make that in the form of motion that we decline to reopen the complaint, as it does not contain any new evidence of professional negligence or misconduct that was not previously considered by us when we last reviewed this matter.
So I actually don't think you need a motion, it's just if you choose to take that route, you just don't do it.
Choose to open or
Right.
take no
You
action,
would need to take a motion if you wanted to reopen it. But if you don't,
or I could take a motion to take no action.
yes.
Let me do that.
Okay.
So I will make a motion that we take no action with regard to complaint number 24.33.
Is there a second?
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And then staff had administratively dismissed a matter submitted, it's item 24.30 by RV Etheridge as to Quest Diagnostics. I reviewed that. Staff has authority to do that. I think it's good form to bless their actions in that regard. So I'll make a motion we support staff's administrative dismissal in item 24.30.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next we move to agenda item number 5, discussion of the Crime Lab Accreditation Program.
Okay, in the first item here is a summary of the accreditation related events that happened this quarter since our last meeting. We had 7 surveillance document reviews and continuations of accreditation by our accredited labs. 2 new recognitions of accreditation by the Commission of laboratories that were already accredited by one of our recognized accrediting bodies, and 1 renewal and reassessment of accreditation. The second item here, B, you all have a summary of our non-consensus proficiency test reports from laboratories and your materials. You'll see the summary of those there. I think we had a follow-up question on one that we still haven't received the answer on. I believe that's the NMS one. So we'll include that in your materials next time, once we get that response. Does anyone have questions about those?
I just wanted to add that the new initial accredited labs, one of them is Orthrum, which is certainly of interest to those who are interested in forensic investigative genetic genealogy. And then you might see there that Los Angeles Police Department Crime Lab asked for accreditation, and that is because they have a case in Galveston County that they're also getting licensed for. So that happens from time to time where it may not make a lot of intuitive sense to see them on there, but every once in a while. What happened? Oh, there it is. Every once in a while, cases cross state lines, and so that's how we deal with it. We have a mechanism for addressing that.
I think also on the accreditation activities, one of our items there was quality forensic toxicology, and I think there's probably some need for additional follow-up there once the new quality director is on board. The number of non-conformances and the nature of some of the non-conformances is certainly a concern. And in the materials, this was sort of largely attributed to turnover, I think, with their quality manager. And we understand that they have a new quality manager in place, which is good. But the accrediting body was unable to verify, I think, compliance with 2 of the 24 non-conformances, including procedures for non-conforming work, which is very important. So I think there's value to requiring additional follow-up from the lab in response to those non-conformances, because the response that we received essentially said that they had staffing issues in quality management. So I think we need a more robust response from the lab.
We can work with ATLA on that as well.
All right, no motion is needed. Item number 6, updates from the licensing advisory committee.
For item 6A on the agenda, right now we have about 1,300 licensees that we manage in our licensing office, primarily managed by Rodney. We have about 348 licenses to renew before December 31, which is, we think we're in very good shape. It seems like a lot, but we think we've done about half of them that renew this year. So 348 more, and I think we actually have like 40 pending applications right now, so maybe closer to 300. And so that is what licensing staff has been working on and focusing on primarily. We also renewed 3 different de minimis laboratory licenses, and that involves updating those non-interpreting folks that could be listed, 100 of those could be listed that we recognize on the website, and Rodney did all the updating to those. Does anyone have any questions about that process? And the reason we've been able to be so efficient in renewing the licenses is because the laboratories and the analysts have been so cooperative in getting their stuff submitted, so thank you all for that. For item 6B here, we do have a memorandum that summarizes 3 reported licensing issues this quarter, where employees departed employment with the laboratories for different reasons. I don't think there's any action required, but if you all have questions about those incidents, just let us know. No questions?
No.
All right. So on agenda item 6C here, yesterday the licensing advisory committee met. We have 3 new licensing advisory committee members, Dion Christoph, who's a firearms expert from Plano PD.
And he's here.
Oh, he is, good. Hi, Dion. And Megan Rommel, who's a DNA technical leader for DPS. And we also now have Jessica Frazier, who's the Comal County Chief Civil Prosecutor and also handles a lot of the criminal matters there in that office. Did you want to say anything about that? The committee also discussed its current working group collab with TDIAI. And they are gonna work together to develop that proficiency monitoring guidance document that we discussed at our last meeting, mainly focused in the areas of crime scene and Friction Ridge forensic science service providers in the state that need guidance in this area on how they can collaborate with other laboratories, for example, to come up with creative ways to effectively monitor the employee's competency. Another item that we discussed that group doing as well is offering some effective guidance on how to develop an SOP, for example, that complies with some of the requirements we're asking for these employee laboratories to have. So I think Michelle Paulson of Plano PD, who's leading this charge for us on this working group, she fielded some questions from the laboratories that had to do with how can we get help on designing our SOP. We don't even have an SOP, so I think it would be really important for us to help facilitate that, and I think this same group can do that as well. So they're gonna report back at our next meeting. We'll just continue to give you guys an update on that activity. We also discussed an issue that we've discussed with this board before, and that was the issue of lack of available accredited firearms experts, particularly in the defense realm. And the group decided to not necessarily make a recommendation to you all, but just to direct staff to assemble some guidance on maybe resources or grants that private practitioners might be able to access to achieve accreditation in the area of firearms. Do you want?
There are grant sources available out there, and our hope was that we could run some of those down and make those available to the smaller practitioners, because carving out an exception for firearms is something that the group is not quite ready to make a recommendation to the commission that that's something we should do. So our hope was that we could get some help to people to get accredited, because the big lift financially is that initial accreditation application. Maintenance is a little more doable, so we will be continuing to work on that. But there definitely was an appreciation of two things. Number one is, if you talk to any firearms examiner, they will tell you that they can't really do their jobs well with the current technology. Now with 3D microscopy it will be different, because they can actually share across the platform without the physical evidence having to move anywhere. But right now with the regular microscopes that they use for this work, they do need, in order to do their jobs well, to take possession of the evidence. And the moment you take possession of the physical evidence, you come under 38.35 of the Code of Criminal Procedure, which requires accreditation. So it's a tough lift for folks that are out there trying to, be a one-person or two-person shop. They certainly can look at a case file of an accredited lab and offer critique or comment, but it's nowhere near as effective as actually looking at the evidence. So there's that. The 3D microscopy should help, and we do have a number of labs in Texas currently in the throes of validating that, which is not a small task. And then people really did seem to acknowledge that it is hard to source a defense expert within the accredited lab system. There are some labs that will do fee for service, so there are options, but a lot of them are already backlogged, so they are working really hard to get their own cases caught up. So it is certainly an issue that we recognize, but our hope is to get help to those labs. The other thing that some of the attorneys said, I actually ran into Ben Wolf from OCFW yesterday, and he said, look, I'd really rather get defense resources that are accredited rather than showing up to court and then we have this sort of two-tiered scenario where the expert I'm calling isn't accredited and the state's expert is. And that's actually not a great thing for my case either. I would rather have an accredited expert. So what we're going to try to do is move forward and get those resources to folks. Hopefully that makes sense.
The final thing that the committee did yesterday pertains to item 6D, and they finalized recommended standards for employing laboratories of forensic anthropologists voluntary licensees. The recommended standards are included and summarized in your meeting materials. You'll notice that we struck something from the top of it, and that was the working OSAC registry standard document, and that's because OSAC has pulled that down for now, and they're going to hopefully update it into a more formalized document that has, for the first document, standards rather than guidance, and then for the second document, more guidance that pertains to quality assurance. But the working group and the forensic anthropologists in the state that helped on this aspect, they hope to adopt those or build this into this rulemaking as well once the OSAC registry has those quality assurance standards on the registry. Any questions about that? We hope that you all will make a motion to adopt these, and these will take effect January 15 of next year.
All right, is there a motion to adopt the recommended updates to required quality standards for employing laboratories of voluntary licensees?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 7.
Item 7 is an adoption of a repeal where we took down an administrative rule that just had the incorrect numbering on it. We already have the correct numbering published, we just need you all to adopt the repeal.
Is there a motion to adopt the repeal of section 651.402, subject to suggested non-substantive revisions from the Office of the Governor, Texas Register and Commission staff?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 8.
Item number 8 is a proposed rulemaking that provides a definition of what an inactive license actually is, in a sense, really to ensure that it doesn't have any negative or disciplinary connotation by the commission, but rather is a result of something like a job change or position change or otherwise that disconnects the employee from the accredited lab setting and performing forensic analysis, which would render them no longer eligible for the license. And so we just make that clear in this rulemaking, and then we also in this rulemaking ask that we require laboratories to report changes in employment, which is something our accredited laboratories already do, but we express that now in the rulemaking.
All right. Is there a motion to propose changes to the rules discussed, subject to suggested non-substantive revisions from the Office of the Governor, Texas Register and Commission staff?
I'll make that formal motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 9.
So I just wanted to fill the commission in on a couple of different things in the DNA discipline. So last time we were here, the commission adopted and has published the report in the Armstrong matter involving the evaluation of DNA evidence given activity. That has gone all over the place. Lots of people have read it at the federal level, various states, SWIG-DAM leadership, SWIG-DAM members. And we've gotten really great feedback on it. And they actually asked Dr. Coble to present on it to the leadership team. And in addition, the FBI, so this is when I say they, I mean the FBI, they asked Sam Perkins, who was the DNA analyst in the case, alongside Michelle Madrid, who's from the LA County Sheriff Department's crime lab and worked on the NIST Human Factors report. The two of them sort of co-presented on the report to SWIG-DAM. Sam did a bang-up job with her slide deck. It's really well done. And although because I'm not in SWIG-DAM, I didn't get a chance to see how it went. I understand it went very well, and it was really great, I think, for her to, since she was the main testifying analyst for DPS and has a leadership role in their DNA policy making. I thought it was great for her to be able to present her perspective, actually having been on the stand in this actual case, and how she answered those questions. And it's enlightening, I think, and helpful for our DNA TLs who we are bringing together periodically to talk about the hardest issues that face DNA analysts in our state. So the FBI has been very receptive, as has ISFG also met, the International Society for Forensic Genetics. And they talked about a lot of these issues, and I think we're very appreciative of the report that we wrote as well. We had lengthy conversations with John Butler and Melissa Taylor from NIST. And we are trying to brainstorm how to move some of this work forward in the most efficient way we can, an effective way we can. So I think it's going to involve both international participants through ISFG and certainly in the US, the OSAC and SWIGDAM. So Mike, Dr. Coble, I don't know if you would like to share your experience presenting the commission's report to the leadership. That would be helpful.
Yeah, I think that there's obviously, I think the community is eager for some guidance in this area, and so the SWIGDAM and OSAC, I think, are interested in trying to help the community. So it's very early on in discussions, but as you mentioned, they seem to me to be very receptive of the report and recommendations thus far.
And then the other thing that I wanted to share with you is that we will be working very closely with the Center for Human Identification to do a series of meetings and trainings, and we've sent out a survey asking people to rank their interests by people. I mean the DNA technical leaders who will be participating. We have numerous subjects, some carryover from last year, some new subjects. We've already done one via Zoom, and we will be doing, I think we have 4 more slated between now and the end of fiscal year August 31st of 2025. So we're asking the labs that have DNA sections to please support your DNA TLs in attending 2 in-person meetings over the course of this fiscal year. One will likely be in Fort Worth and the other perhaps at the Ranger Museum in Waco. We're trying to find places that people can get to relatively easily. And we've done them there before and they've gone well. So just stay tuned for that. And if we can get the TACLID and the lab director's support to send their people to these meetings, 2 of them, the other that I mentioned, will be done virtually. So we're trying to really strike a balance, or we're not burdening people with too much travel, but it also is nice when they're all able to get together. I think they see a lot of value in that time when they are able to spend it. And we're grateful to Sam Houston State University and the center that Dr. Kerrigan runs, because they also supported us last time in the form of snacks and beverages, which we always need because it's hard for the state to buy anything. So that was very appreciated. And we will continue to work with the Institute. I said the center, but I mean the Institute at SAM on these projects as well. So thank you. That's all I have.
All right, item number 10, update discussion regarding the Commission's Firearm Tool Marks Working Group.
So we held a meeting, if you recall from the Dana Williams report, one of the things we decided to do was set up a group comprised of practitioners as well as folks from NIST and lawyers, and it went very well. It has a lot of practitioners in it because our philosophy is that we really want to get the direct input from people who are in the labs doing this work. especially the smaller labs, because something that DPS is able to do or HFSC is not necessarily always as easy for the smaller labs, especially those that may have 1 or 2 firearms examiners. So the first thing that we said about doing was working on a definition of consultation that would be universally adopted, the idea being that one needs to, consultations between examiners happen, and they happen before the decision or opinion around source conclusion is reached, and those need to be written down. That is an accreditation requirement, and the reason they need to be written down is because the documentation allows the parties later to ask questions. If it's a harder case, you know, what went on in the course of that consultation, and then after the opinion decision has been reached, anything that is back and forth between examiners post-decision is referred to as conflict resolution, also needs to be written down in the case record. And those things are important for transparency. And so what the group had decided to do was to adopt the OSAC Subcommittee on Firearms definition of consultation. And then we got some feedback from one of the smaller labs raising questions about the practicality of that definition. I think I'm very grateful to NIST and Henry Swafford in particular, who went back to the OSAC subcommittee, talked to the chair, talked to some of the small practitioners in that group to see what their thought process was there. And I think we'll be able to come to a resolution on that definition very soon. We have a meeting in December at which the authors of that article on method conformance and method performance, Henry Swafford and company, will be presenting that work. Steve Lund, who is at NIST and a statistician, has actually developed a tool to help with implementation of those concepts, which is fabulous. I mean, compared to just, you know, reading the journal article and then trying to get it right somehow, that he's actually working on something practical to help the lab. So we've also sent out a survey asking what working groups they'd like to participate in, or subgroups of the larger working group. So we feel like it's going well. I do want to say out loud how NIST is sending 2 statisticians plus Henry Swafford to all of our meetings, which is really great. And I think the leadership there is really emphasizing, like, okay, we can write all these articles and publish them in all these journals, and that work is great, but if the practitioners aren't implementing any of it, then we're not having the reach that we would really like to have. So for them, this is sort of a pilot of, you know, we publish something and then can we actually make it happen in the real world and you know, improve the understanding of the end user of what firearms analysis is and what its limitations are. So we are really happy about that. And we have a very wide range of experience and size of lab among that working group, so that's good too. And Dion and Bill Worski are both on the working group, so if anyone has questions, they could also answer questions.
Any further comment? All right. Item number 11, update from the Texas Association of Crime Laboratory Directors, Dr. Stout.
Good morning, y'all. Not just too much to report on TAC-led business, because we meet every other meetings. We'll meet again in January. Probably the main thing to discuss is legislative session is coming. Already having quite a few meetings and conversations, at least on the Senate side. Waiting a little bit until House leadership settles before we have too many conversations there. There's really 3 major topics that we're discussing outside of what will be the flurry of bills to try and keep tabs on, may have implications for laboratories. One is, how do we address workforce development and pipeline issues for forensic laboratories? The main idea that we have been discussing and seeing remarkable traction on is the idea of a state-funded apprenticeship program. Started with the word fellowship. Apprenticeship seems to be the word that people understand. Fine, we can run with that. But the idea would be state funds the first 2 years of labor and benefits for an individual that might be in training or working towards something in the laboratory. It doesn't defray the cost the laboratory is gonna have into it, but it at least defrays the cost of that person. Treat it like a forgivable loan. If they stay in the Texas Public Laboratory for 5 years beyond that, forgive the cost of it. If they choose to go somewhere else, the state can work on trying to leverage that. But so provide some incentive for those individuals to stay in one of the laboratories in Texas for a while. And like I said, I've seen pretty remarkable traction on that so far. Another issue that been talking around is kind of, it's involved in some labs more than others, trying to use issue of storage of old toxicology blood tubes as a springboard to discuss how do we deal with disposition of evidence and make that more efficient for the entire system. And then last is there are a variety of conversations, as Lynn mentioned, around hemp and THC and marijuana, and I'm not sure I am smart enough to predict where we're gonna land, but I think there is likely to be some conversations around this of just what do we do as a state to address the continuing fallout of the Delta 8, Delta 9, Delta 10, HHC, semi-synthetic or synthetic tetrahydrocannabinols, as however you want to try and call them. There are a variety of ideas out there. I am really not sure what might gain traction or not, but I think it will be part of the discussion in this legislative session. So I would also please encourage, if anybody runs up on it, because bills will start getting filed here in the not so distant future. I try really hard, and the city of Houston holds me out a lot with trying to keep tabs on all the bills that are getting filed, but if you run up on or become aware of a bill that has any kind of implication for that, please let me know. It's really tough to try and keep tabs on the last session had, what, 5,000 bills filed? It's a lot. So any questions? Happy to answer.
I have a question. I remember some time ago thinking about Tim Fallon before he retired had been working with some legislators on a bill that would protect the information like home address and stuff like that, like we do for other people in the system for forensic analysts. Is that something that?
Yeah, haven't heard of that one in quite a while. Let's talk a little bit about that and see if there's.
Just popped in my brain, I'm not sure.
The other thing I forgot to mention was, actually several of us were testifying to, Senate Criminal Justice Committee on an interim charge about supporting sexual assault victims, really to more issues around sexual assault kits. So Dr. Coble and Erica were both there testifying, as was Brady. Appreciate everyone's contribution to that. I think it was well received by the committee, so thank you.
Dr. Carey.
Dr. Carey. You know, you're both sitting over there, and I rarely see you both in the same place, so.
It was a very good hearing.
It was.
Any questions? All right, thank you. The topic about not having enough analysts is a real issue for every single lab, and holding on to them. You train them and then they go somewhere else, so having a way to offset some of the loss or keeping them in is a great plan if something will go through.
Thank you, Peter, for pursuing that. I often think, oh, there's another Peter has another idea, but this one really feels like it's getting some traction.
Usually I have good ideas.
See, I didn't interrupt you, I just let you go on.
Yeah, and Dr. Barnard said, I'm not gonna stop Peter, he can talk as long as he wants today. So. You're in a generous mood. I did wanna let people know that we have, the National Association of Forensic Science Boards has a conference, second annual conference coming up November 21st to 22nd in Albany, New York. Last year, the first annual conference of that group was hosted here in Austin in this room. And it went very well, and this year we're expecting, I think, about 80 or 90 people to turn out to that. And essentially what it is a forum for the different state forensic science boards and commissions and coordinating groups to get together and talk about, what's worked, what hasn't worked, and things like that. We also got some outreach recently from legislators in the state of New York who had an effort a few months back, it was during the summer, to essentially overhaul the New York Commission, and I kid you not, if you looked at what they were gonna do, it was like they took the Texas statute and just plopped it into what New York had. It didn't pass, it ran out of time for various reasons, but they want to talk to us about what our experience has been, particularly around licensing, because that would be a very new thing for them. So that is what the NAFSB is all about, is connecting the different states together, the different state experiences, what's worked, what hasn't. So we will be heading up there to Albany. Peter will be speaking on a panel, Brady Mills will be speaking on a panel, Dr. Kerrigan will be on a panel. So we encourage people to go and participate in that. John Morgan is the executive director of the organization and is essentially heading that up. So that will be in Albany in November. And I'm not sure where next year's will be, but I think the two going the ones with most likely chance of being selected are Maryland and Arizona. So we'll see. It'll be somewhere. And we would love to have as many people from Texas there as possible, and also would really encourage you to be members of the NAFSB. It's a growing organization, but you learn a lot. And there are a lot of states in that group looking to Texas for answers. And I say, I don't know that we have the answers, but we can share our experience. So it's a great group, and we're happy that it continues to grow.
All right, item number 13, are there any matters the Commissioner wants to direct staff to place on the next meeting agenda? No? Okay. So the tentative schedule for the future meetings is January 31st of 25, April 11th of 25, and October 24th of 25. Is there a motion to direct staff to schedule these meetings?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. All right, is there any public comment?
I would like to address you if I could. I need to go over that. Okay. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Barbara Hervey from the Court of Criminal Appeals, and I am retiring, not by choice, but anyway, I am retiring at the end of this year. And I just wanted to thank you for all the incredible work that all of you do and continue to do. And it's been a pleasure to come to the meetings and be part of the discussions and to assist any way we can. I will be finished running the grant on November 1st. David Newell will take it over. And I would encourage you to keep in contact with all of our grantees because they need the training. And anything I can do for you after I'm gone, please let me know. But I wanted to thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Thank
you.
I think of all the people in the state who aren't on the commission or in the labs, Judge Hervey has been the biggest champion of the work of this commission, and we will miss her dearly on the CCA. But having said that, now she will have more free time to do even more forensic science related things. So thank you, Judge Hervey, for everything. You've been a great supporter and we're grateful.
Thank you.
Before we adjourn, I think we ought to congratulate Dr. Jeff Bernard on his upcoming retirement. I rarely talk to quitters, but I'm going to make an exception for him. But one more week, am I correct?
Yeah.
Congratulations, that's all.
You may have a different opinion if I showed up in court against you.
They're likely.
All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion carries. The commission meeting's adjourned.